Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and felt absolutely certain that someone was standing just a few feet away, even though you were completely alone? Not because you heard a sound, but because something inside you knew you weren't safe. The stories you're about to hear are 100% real, pieced together through public records, first-hand witness accounts, and official reports. Some names have been changed to protect the people involved, but every event happened exactly as described. Before you listen, take a moment to like this video. Your support helps these stories reach other horror lovers who crave true, unsettling experiences like you. Comment where you're watching from. You're part of my horror family, and I want to know where my family's watching from. And when it's over, comment which story stayed with you the most. If you want more true horror like this, subscribe. It helps fuel this channel to bring you even more terrifying stories.
I went into the Appalachian mountains because I needed silence. Not the peaceful kind people post about online, but the kind that forces your thoughts to slow down. I'd been burned out for months. Work, noise, constant notifications, so I took a long weekend and drove west into a stretch of forest in eastern Kentucky where the roads narrow into gravel and the trees lean inward like they're listening. I parked near an old logging trail just before dusk. No service bars, no signs, just a rusted metal gate half sunk into mud and a handwritten notice nailed crookedly to a tree warning about washed-out paths farther in. I liked that. It meant fewer people. The hike to my campsite was short but steep, the ground soft from recent rain. Everything smelled like wet leaves and rot. The forest felt older here. Thick trunks, moss on rocks, branches tangled low enough to brush my shoulders. I found a flat spot near a shallow hollow, set back from the trail, and pitched my tent before the light drained completely. By nightfall, fog rolled in from the valley below, slow and quiet, swallowing the trees one by one. The woods went still in that unsettling way, where even insects seemed to stop. I cooked a simple meal on my camp stove, listening to distant water moving somewhere I couldn't see. Nothing felt wrong at first, just heavy, like the air was pressing down. I crawled into my tent early. The fabric felt damp when I touched it, and the smell of nylon mixed with soil clung to everything. I lay there listening to the forest breathe, branches creaking, something small moving through leaves. Normal sounds, expected sounds. Sometime after midnight, I heard footsteps. Not close at first, just the faint, rhythmic crunch of boots on wet ground, slow, measured, like someone walking carefully, not wanting to slip. I held my breath and listened. The steps moved closer, circling the tent, stopping now and then continuing. I could tell by the sound that whoever it was heavy enough to sink into the mud a little with each step. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The footsteps stopped instantly. The silence afterward was worse, thick, complete. I waited, heart pounding, expecting a response, an apology, maybe laughter, someone admitting they'd wandered too close. Nothing came. I told myself it was another camper, maybe lost, maybe curious. Eventually, the sound started again, farther away this time, then faded entirely. I didn't sleep much after that. When morning finally came, it arrived gray and wet. Fog hung low in the hollow, blurring the trees into pale shapes. My body felt stiff and heavy. As I unzipped the tent, the first thing I noticed was the ground. Boot prints circled my campsite in a wide ring, pressed deep into the mud. Fresh, clear. I crouched down to look at them, and that's when my stomach tightened. They were my boots, same tread pattern, same worn-down heel on the left, same small cut near the toe, that I'd gotten months ago hiking near home. I compared them side by side, my foot next to the print, hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. The prints didn't wander randomly. They moved with purpose, looping once around the tent before heading straight into the woods. No return path. Just one clean line of impressions disappearing between the trees. I stood there for a long time, fog dampening my hair, listening to the hollow remain unnaturally quiet. I hadn't sleepwalked. I knew that. I'd never done anything like that in my life. Still, the thought crept in and refused to leave. I backed slowly, hands shaking just enough to notice. But instead of leaving, I followed the prints, just a little way, enough to see where they led. They vanished where the ground turned rocky, swallowed by leaves and shadow. That's when the unease settled in deep, quiet, and heavy, like something had already happened, and I'd only just noticed the evidence. I decided to stay one more night. The second night felt different from the moment the sun dipped behind the ridge. The fog came earlier, thicker, creeping low across the ground and soaking into my boots. I moved my campsite closer to the trail, telling myself it was practical. Easier exit if something went wrong. I tried to stay busy, cleaned gear that was already clean, reorganized my pack twice, boiled water I didn't need. Every sound made me pause. A snap twig, a distant animal call echoing through the hollow. When darkness fully settled, the woods felt compressed, like the trees were closer than they had been the night before. I lay awake in my tent, eyes open, listening. The footsteps came again, closer this time. They started behind me, slow and deliberate, the same careful pace as before. The ground squelched softly under each step. I could hear breathing now, not labored, just present. A person trying not to make noise. I didn't call out this time. The steps circled the tent once, twice, then stopped right behind my head. I could see the shadow through the fabric, broad and still. Minutes passed, maybe longer. I felt sweat collect along my spine, despite the cold. Then the steps moved away, fading into the fog. I didn't sleep at all after that. At first light, I found something new, near the edge of my campsite. A flattened patch of leaves where someone had stood for a long time. Next to it, pressed into the mud, was a single boot print. My boot, but deeper, as if more weight had been put into it. I left immediately, or at least I tried to. The trail looked wrong. Familiar landmarks felt shifted, trees closer together, the path narrower. The fog made distance hard to judge. I walked for what felt like an hour, only to find myself back near the hollow. That's when I saw the cabin. I hadn't noticed it before. Weathered wood slumped under a sagging roof, half hidden by brush. The door hung open, creaking faintly in the breeze. Inside, it smelled like mold and damp paper. Old furniture lay overturned. Dust coated everything except a narrow path worn into the floor, leading to a corner where a small cot sat beneath a window. On the wall above it were photos, dozens of them. Some were old, yellowed, curling at the edges. Others were recent. All of them were of campsites, tents, fire pits, people sleeping. One photo stopped me cold. It was me, taken from behind, standing at my campsite the day before. Same jacket, same pack. The timestamp scrawled beneath it was yesterday's date. On a small table nearby sat a notebook, swollen from moisture. Inside were pages of neat handwriting, dates, locations, notes about gear, about routines, and about boots. Same size, one entry read, "Easier to follow when they don't realize." I didn't read any further. I ran. I don't remember how long it took to reach my car. I don't remember the drive home. Some parts of that weekend are just gone, blank. I still hike sometimes, but never alone. Never without checking the ground behind me. And I got rid of those boots. But sometimes, late at night, I'll wake up with the certainty that someone is standing just out of sight, wearing the same tread, walking the same path, taking careful steps so I won't hear them until it's too late. I didn't want to go camping that weekend. Not really. But there's a certain pressure that comes with old friendships. The kind where saying no feels like admitting you've changed too much. So I packed my gear, threw it in the back of my truck, and followed my friends into the Appalachian Mountains toward a lake tucked deep into eastern Tennessee, near a town so small it barely showed up on the map. The road in was narrow and cracked, winding through hollows where the fog sat low even in the afternoon. Abandoned houses leaned toward the ditches, their porches collapsed, furniture still visible through broken windows. It smelled like wet wood and rust. No cell signal after the last gas station. The lake itself was quiet in a way that felt intentional. Still water, dark and reflective, ringed by dense trees. No other cars, no boats. Just us and the sound of wind moving across the surface. We set up camp on a muddy bank under tall pines. The ground was soft, spongy with rot. I noticed how sound didn't carry the way it should have. Even our laughter felt swallowed. That's when we saw the fire. Across the lake, on the far shore, a campfire burned low and steady. Orange light flickered through the trees. Smoke rose straight up, barely disturbed by the breeze. "Someone else is out here," one of my friends said. It didn't bother us at first. If anything, it was reassuring. Proof we weren't completely alone. That first night, the fire stayed lit long after we settled into our tents. No voices, no movement. Just the steady glow across the water. Sometime after midnight, I heard coughing. It came from the far shore. A rough, wet cough, deep in the chest. 3 short bursts, then a pause, then again. I lay there listening, counting the seconds between each fit. The sound carried clearly over the lake, too clearly. Nobody else spoke. Nobody laughed. The cough stopped, then resumed. Always the same pattern. In the morning, the fire was still there, burned down low but warm enough to send up a thin ribbon of smoke. We joked about it over breakfast, trying to keep things light. Maybe an old fisherman. Maybe someone sick who wanted privacy. None of us suggested paddling over. It felt rude or unnecessary. The second night, the fire was lit again at dusk. Same place, same size. The coughing started at exactly the same time. Same rhythm, same pauses. I noticed then that it always happened just after full dark, when the lake turned black and the trees became silhouettes. The sound made my shoulders tense every time. It didn't echo. It felt close, like the lake wasn't as wide as it looked. By the third day, small things started to feel off. One of our paddles was moved from where we'd left it. Not far, just rotated, handle pointing the other way. A bag of food felt lighter than it should have. We blamed animals, raccoons, bears, anything but a person. That afternoon, I stood at the edge of the water, staring across at the fire pit. I thought I saw movement between the trees, but when I focused, there was nothing. Just trunks and shadow. That night, the coughing sounded closer than before. Not louder, just nearer. I didn't sleep much. None of us did. When dawn finally came, the fire across the lake was still warm. And for the first time, I felt a quiet, unshakable certainty that someone had been watching us for longer than we realized. We decided to paddle across the lake that morning. Nobody said it outright, but I could tell we all needed to see it, to put a shape to the unease that had settled into our chests. The fog hadn't lifted yet, hanging low over the water, beating on our jackets as we pushed off. The lake was colder than it looked. Each paddle stroke sent ripples outward that disappeared into grey nothingness. Halfway across, the coughing started again. Same pattern, same timing. It came from directly ahead of us. Nobody spoke. When we reached the far shore, the smell hit first. Old smoke, damp ash, rotting food. The fire pit sat in a small clearing, stones arranged carefully, ashes stirred recently. The ground around it was trampled flat. There was no tent, no sleeping bag, no obvious shelter, but there were signs of long-term presence. A pile of empty cans buried half in mud. Food scraps wrapped in plastic. A log dragged close to the fire, worn smooth from use. The fire pit was still warm. That shouldn't have been possible. I walked the perimeter, boots sinking into wet soil. That's when I saw the journal. It sat inside a plastic grocery bag, tucked beneath a rock to keep it dry. I wish I hadn't opened it. The pages were filled with tight, careful handwriting. Dates going back months. Notes about weather, about lake levels, about sounds. Then the entries changed. They arrived today. Descriptions followed. How many of us? What time we set up camp? Where we stored food? When lights went out? Who woke up at night? My hands started shaking as I turned the pages. There were sketches of our campsite, of the way our tents were arranged. Notes about coughing, about how it carried better at night, how it kept us awake. They don't cross the lake, one entry read, not until the last day. I dropped the journal into the mud like it burned. We left immediately. The paddle back felt endless. The fog pressed in, swallowing the shore behind us. Halfway across, I heard movement in the water behind us, slow, deliberate strokes. I didn't turn around. Back at our camp, nothing looked disturbed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it all felt smaller somehow. Closer together, we packed in silence. As we loaded the last of our gear, the coughing came again. This time from behind us, deeper in the trees, not across the lake, closer. We didn't investigate, we didn't speak. We got in our vehicles and left. The road out felt longer than it had on the way in. Fog thickened as we climbed, swallowing the trees and the abandoned houses. At one point, I thought I saw someone standing near the road, watching us pass. When I looked again, there was only mist and shadow. I still think about that journal, about the careful patience in those pages, about how someone could sit in silence for months, observing strangers, recording their routines, waiting. I don't camp near lakes anymore, and whenever I hear someone cough at night, deep, wet, rhythmic, I feel my chest tighten, like the sound is carrying across water I can't see. Because the worst part isn't knowing someone was watching us. It's knowing they let us leave. We camped in the Appalachian mountains every summer when I was growing up. Always the same stretch of land outside a forgotten town in West Virginia that my uncle insisted on calling quiet country. The drive there wound through hollows where fog clung to the road like wet cotton, past boarded-up homes and sagging barns with furniture still inside, as if people had stepped out and never come back. By the time we reached the dirt road leading to the campsite, the air smelled like rain-soaked wood and rust. That year, I was 17 and exhausted in a way I didn't have words for yet. My parents had been fighting for months, and camping felt less like a vacation and more like being trapped with tension in the woods. Still, When we arrived, everything looked familiar. The same clearing near the creek, the same leaning trees, the same old fire ring blackened by decades of ash. We set up our tents before sunset. My parents shared one. My younger cousin slept with my aunt and uncle, and I took the small tent on the edge of the clearing. I remember noticing how close the tree line felt this time. The forest pressed in tighter than I remembered, dark even before the sun fully dipped. As night fell, the woods grew strangely quiet. No crickets, no frogs from the creek. Just the soft pop of the fire and the occasional shift of someone settling into a sleeping bag. The ground under my tent felt damp, cold seeping through the thin padding. I fell asleep eventually, but it wasn't deep. The kind of sleep where every sound feels too close. Sometime before dawn, I heard someone whisper my name. Soft, careful, like they didn't want to wake anyone else. I assumed it was my uncle. He had a habit of checking on us early, especially if weather was coming. I lay still, listening. "Hey," the voice whispered again. "Hey." My name followed, clear this time. I waited for the tent zipper to move, for footsteps, for anything. Nothing happened. I whispered back, barely louder than breath. "What?" No response. Then my name came again. Same tone, same cadence. My own voice. That's when my chest tightened. I could hear my family breathing around the campsite. Soft snores, shifting fabric. Everyone was still asleep. I held my breath, staring at the thin tent wall inches from my face. The whisper came again, closer now, right outside my head. My name, exactly how I'd say it. I didn't answer again. Eventually, the whispering stopped. No footsteps, no retreat. Just silence thick enough to press against my ears. I didn't sleep after that. When the sky finally lightened to a dull gray, I crawled out of the tent. Fog hugged the ground, wetting my socks instantly. My uncle was already up, crouched by the fire pit, rubbing his hands together. I asked him quietly if he'd been outside my tent early that morning. He looked at me, confused. Said he'd slept straight through. We checked on everyone else. Nobody had been up. Nobody had called my name. That's when my cousin noticed the ground near my tent. The dirt was torn up, long grooves carved into the soft earth. Deep drag marks leading away from where my head had been, straight toward the tree line. They weren't footprints, more like something heavy had been pulled backward. The marks stopped abruptly where the forest began. No explanation, no trail beyond that. The woods stood still, watching. The adults tried to laugh it off at first. Said maybe an animal had gotten curious, dragged something past my tent. But there was nothing missing. No food disturbed. No gear moved. And the marks were too deliberate, too straight. We packed up later than planned. Nobody said it outright, but I could feel the tension shifting. Voices lower, movements quicker. The fog didn't lift until nearly noon, and even then, the trees stayed dark and heavy. On the way out, my uncle suggested we stop by the old cabin, farther up the trail. He said it used to belong to a family friend, someone who'd kept an eye on the land. I didn't want to go, but nobody asked. The cabin sat half sunken into the hillside, wood gray with rot. The door creaked open easily, the smell of mold and damp paper rushing out. Inside, the air felt colder. Furniture lay overturned, dust thick except for a narrow path worn into the floor. On the wall hung old photos, families posing by tents, kids standing near the creek. Some of them dated decades back. Others were recent, too recent. One photo showed our campsite, taken from the trees. Another showed me, standing near my tent. The evening before, my back turned. I felt dizzy, my ears rang. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was on the floor, staring at a small table in the corner. There was a tape recorder there. Old, scratched. Beside it sat a notebook, pages swollen from moisture. I didn't want to open it. I knew I shouldn't, but I did. The writing was neat, careful. Dates, weather notes, names, our names, descriptions of routines, who slept where, who woke easily, notes about voices, about practicing. One entry stood out, underlined twice. They respond better when they hear themselves. I dropped the notebook. My uncle pulled me up, told everyone we were leaving. No arguments this time. The drive home felt unreal. Fog swallowed the road again, thicker than before. At one point, I thought I heard my name from the trees, faint and distant, but I didn't tell anyone. Years have passed since then. I don't camp anymore. I can't sleep in tents. Sometimes I struggle to recognize my own voice when I speak, like it doesn't fully belong to me. What stays with me most isn't the whispering. It's the thought that someone had been close enough to learn me, close enough to listen, to practice, to wait quietly in the dark, knowing exactly how I'd sound when I answered.